For assignment 1, I have chosen the topic learning. The article I'll focus on today is called When Parents Model Violence. Observational learning is defined as learning by watching others. The role of observational learning in domestic violence has been well studied, with researchers endeavouring to find a link between witnessing violence in the family of origin and later perpetration of domestic violence. It is important to study these possible links, as the effort to minimise instances of domestic violence is a relevant pursuit in modern society. However, so far, results are not conclusive. This study will look at the role of observational learning under precise circumstances: weapon threat and/or use. Weapons are used as a specific form of violence. Specific modes of violence are ones that are witnessed and then later perpetrated. The researchers in this study have chosen to focus on a specific form of violence, as existing research is often complicated by involving many forms of violence. For example, sexual, physical, and psychological violence. This study hopes to minimise that confusion and establish further clarity to the role of observational learning in domestic violence. It is hypothesised that if observational learning is key in the development of violence, in particular domestic violence, there will be a strong, noticeable correlation between the form of violence used in families of origin and that chosen by perpetrators. (1,099) imprisoned male batterers made up the initial sample. All were under court order to undergo assessment. Thus, researchers were able to examine each individual to determine whether they would fit the needs of the study. Participants were required to have existing documentation on their crimes, as the questions asked of them would be fact-checked. 362 participants made up the final sample. They were aged between 18 and 65, with a mean age of 33. 86% were African American, 12% Caucasian, and 2% other. The chosen design in this research report was a correlational study, meaning it took place on a single given occasion. Each individual completed a survey made up of 4 questions. The questions were split into 2 halves, the first half relating to instances where the individual observed weapon threat by parents and weapon use by parents. The second half related to 2 instances where the participant threatened or used weapons against a partner. Results for the second half of the survey were cross-checked against existing evidence in the participant's criminal file. In order to make it easier for researchers to compare results, the results were then dichotomized. As you could see, witnessing threat and witnessing use of violence were first grouped together. The researchers have indicated that this method makes it easier for comparison between the 2 groups of questions. However, those that witnessed threat and/or use of violence once were grouped in the same category as those who witnessed it several times. This may adversely affect the results, as it cannot be established whether repeat exposure is needed to create a strong likelihood of future perpetration. The results showed a significant relationship between witnessing the threat or use of weaponized violence between parents and the future threat or use of weapons against romantic partners. As you can see by this table, the majority of those that witnessed weapon threat or use by parents went on to threaten or use weapons against their own romantic partners, 83% of the time. However, those that did witness such things only made up a small percentage of the total sample, less than 7%. Furthermore, 55% of people who did not witness threat or use of weapons by parents went on to commit similar crimes anyway, meaning that there is no causation between the two instances, but there is a strong correlation that should not be denied or ignored. From the results, it can be concluded that observational learning plays a significant role in developing a tendency for weapon threat or use against romantic partners. The researchers hope that this evidence will encourage further vigilance and give credence to taking special consideration of children growing up in households where weaponized violence is likely. While choosing to focus on weapon threat or use to the exclusion of all else means that it becomes easier to define violent behaviours, it can mean that finding a large enough group of eligible participants becomes difficult. In this case, all participants were court-ordered. It's unclear from this article, but there could have been some incentive in place for those that participated. The use of a questionnaire can arguably be criticised, as they rely on the honesty of participant answers, which cannot be guaranteed. In this case, there was existing evidence to back up the second part of the questionnaire, but no data on the validity of the claims that perpetrators did or did not witness interparental violence as children. The researchers suggest that further studies should establish evidence of these instances, perhaps by using a longitudinal or experimental design. Using a fixed Likert scale and further dichotomizing the results may skew important data in favour of the hypothesis. Finally, the participant sample used for this study lacks diversity. However, due to the precise and severe nature of what was being studied, it may be deemed acceptable to limit who can be involved. Further research should investigate any potential links between gender and perpetration, and similarly, the roles of ethnicity and cultural upbringing.